I am with Dalia Platt. And Dalia, we crossed paths because I think it was like a mutual friend. I think it was Greg Foss who somehow connected us through email. And Greg Foss can have a powerful voice. And I think he said, Tom, you better speak to Dalia. And then that was enough for me. He said that, and I thought, oh my gosh, who is this person? I better speak to Dalia. So here we are. So Dalia, welcome to the Your Life, Your Terms podcast. Thank you for doing this. And I want to kind of dive in with your story. So we're going to talk about Bitcoin here and what drew you to this, because your background, like none of our backgrounds really started with Bitcoin. But I'd like to begin with, how did you get to your seat right now? Like, what is this journey? You got an MBA in Miami, at the University of Miami. So your background is, I would call it traditional finance. And now you're
100%.
all in on Bitcoin. Maybe you could start with, what made you have this, I don't know if it's a career change or this shift to focusing your time and efforts on Bitcoin. What was the draw to you? Why is this something important to you? Can we start there?
Absolutely. 100%. And I have to tell you that because of Greg Foss, my life changed forever. So I am forever grateful, because he's the one that connected me with me putting my Bitcoin. That's the company that I worked for and like learned so much and have done. Like, I actually feel proud of the work that was done there. And then he introduced me also to Looking Glass with Education, which is also the company that I'm working for and through which I'm working with the Bitcoin advisor. So it's like a new world to me because of Greg Foss. And it was funny because I okay, so going back to why. I studied industrial engineering, and I was an engineer in Colombia. And then Colombia's situation at that moment was horrendous. It was like the Pablo Escobar times.
Got it.
So there was kidnappings, bombs. So I was very lucky that I had the opportunity to just leave. There was one day that like a bomb, where I was living in Bogota, a bomb exploded and my entire windows of my apartment exploded. I was alone. And that's just like one tiny thing, besides the fear of living there with my parents. That's another whole story. So I ended up, I said, I can't live here anymore. I really like can't stand this. And I was lucky enough that my parents had a place in Miami. And I said, you know what, the easiest place to go, Miami. So I just applied to Miami to the MBA, and I ended up meeting my husband. That's another story. But that's how I ended up here in the States. Now, when I got married, I could not work as an engineer because I didn't have a visa. And I was going crazy. I live in a place where there's so much materialism, and that's so not me. And I couldn't stand not working, not doing anything. So I started tutoring math and physics. And that led me to like career of 20 some years. So I started tutoring, then I was offered a job at a college, like at a state college, then I started tutoring again, then I started teaching at a school here. That was my life, but my life was at least 8 hours of tutoring every single day. So I loved it. I really loved making an impact. And it was amazing. It started becoming less amazing as I aged. And then like it just starts becoming a little bit too repetitive. And I was just really getting bored. And then the pandemic hit. And it's like everybody else whose journey really started in the pandemic. I said, I'm going to give myself a year I'm not knowing what I'm doing, but I have to change. I was going crazy. I am going to change what I do. And that's how I started listening to well, I started supposedly investing my own money, which did not go well at that moment. And then I started like diving into Bitcoin a little bit. And I listened to a podcast that Greg Foss I have no idea. Like I did not know who he is. No idea. I was just starting into Bitcoin.
Okay,
So
Dalia,
if
don't
you
lose your I don't want you to lose your train of thought, but this is really interesting to me because you probably don't know this, but we were Greg Foss's first podcast. He lives not too far from our office right here, and he was on
so
Twitter.
maybe it was your podcast.
Yeah, no, well, who knows, maybe, but he had like 2,000 Twitter followers, and he was on Twitter, and he was talking about bonds and convexity
Yeah,
and all these
yeah.
concepts that sounded super smart to me, and then he mentioned Bitcoin, and I kind of thought, who is this guy? Like, I feel like I need to talk to this guy. I don't know why. And at the time, he still used to say where he lived in Canada, and that's where we are on his Twitter profile. So I just DM'd him and said, "Hey, you don't know us. Like our office isn't far from where I think you probably live. Would you come in and do a podcast?" And by then we were already down the Bitcoin rabbit hole. Like we were already in it. I just had not heard his angle on why it was interesting. And he came in with cargo shorts, flip-flops, cargo shorts, a t-shirt. I think he had a baseball hat, maybe a baseball hat, I think a baseball, and he just started banging the table. And he was, just screaming about like why everyone needs to know this. And I felt like we had to tell him, "Hey, Greg, like we're on your side. Like I don't know why you're banging the table right now." But he had a
It's
huge
so
impact.
funny.
Yeah, he had a huge impact. So to hear you say you heard Greg Foss, it's like, what a small world. Because, all
And
of
this
us
was probably at the same time because it was like in 2020, like
wow.
when
Yeah.
when the
So cool.
pandemic. So maybe it was
Who
your
knows? Who
podcast that
knows? Who
led
knows?
me through this entire new change
Yeah.
of path and career. So he was talking. He spoke about all those things, the
Yeah.
convexity and the bonds. I'm like, I studied finance and I understand nothing of what he's saying, zero. So, but he also spoke about education, like educating people on Bitcoin. And I don't know, he said something about his grandparents being immigrants. Some of the things that he said like resonated with me. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna write to this guy. He said he has a learning platform for Bitcoin. I'm like, I'm just gonna write. I had no idea why I was writing. Truthfully, I had no idea why I was writing to. I wrote to him and I get an immediate response. So he connected me because of that. He connected me with the people that started Mi Primer Bitcoin, which was just starting, and then the people in Looking Glass. And then my life became Mi Primer Bitcoin in El Salvador for 2 years. All I did 24 hours a day was write curriculum on Bitcoin that I knew nothing about. Initially, I knew nothing. Like I was put into a place that I should not have been put in, and I
You
just
were the right person for
learned.
the place, though. And that's how you learn, by teaching other people. So this was like a perfect thing. Did you end up with that? Did you go to El Salvador to teach that curriculum?
Okay, so I created the curriculum. I am the one that wrote the curriculum like every single time. And I was dying because I'm here in Florida. It was so hard for me to like tell the teachers how I wanted it to be taught. Because with my teaching career, I always thought that teaching has to be engaging, interactive. I'm not a traditional human being at all. So with the curriculum, I designed for every single chapter, like little activities that the teachers could do in class. So I tried my best to speak on those on those rectangles and explain to them the activities, but it doesn't work like that. But so they ended up teaching the curriculum. I spoke to the teachers multiple times, and I went to El Salvador 3 times, and it was very rewarding because at the end, like I ended up in like the Ministry of Education contacted us, and they wanted to create a curriculum that was like based on our curriculum. So I was the one that I was the one that really helped them with things like, for example, in their curriculum, they said the first sentence initially had said, Bitcoin is a new a new centralized currency. That's what they said, the new centralized currency. I'm like, oh my God, I think we need help here. And by that time, I knew a little bit more. So I helped that, and that curriculum is now being taught in every school in El Salvador, which is amazing. Like
That's
that's
so
to
wild,
me, it's
Dalia.
new.
Way to go. Yeah, that must feel very rewarding. Holy smokes. Congratulations on that. That is so huge. Way to go. Wow.
Thank you. And
Yeah.
sometimes I feel it was nothing. Sometimes I say, okay, it was a little bit of something.
It was a
Not it.
little bit of a lot. It was a little bit of a lot. The generational impact on that education going to those children. None of us are going to know, the fruits of your labor through those children who are then going to have children and teach their children. Like the course correction in monetary kind of evolution I know I'm going to sound hyperbolic here, but like on the planet is started with a little seed, and you planted that little seed there. So, wow, really cool. Yeah, that's pretty inspiring. But keep
Well,
going.
it was
I've thrown you off now. Keep going. So you did this with El
no, no,
Salvador.
no, no. It was an amazing journey.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, I realized like how horrible the current fiat system, like in that whole journey, our fiat system is a disaster. And the whys, I didn't understand money. I didn't understand inflation. Every day I would like spend hours
Yeah.
trying to figure this out. And I couldn't. I'm like, I think I was smart, but I really am not. And it in blockchain, and it didn't resonate with me. And I'm writing this curriculum, and I'm like, I have no idea what I'm writing. So at the beginning there was help that like little by little it improved, but I think that where I ended it, I still have learned from that moment on, and I think it was not very applicable to businesses, to industries,
Mm.
to it was just it was a lot. It, definitely, the first four chapters were about our current system, what's wrong with money, and how we can fix it. Why Bitcoin is a solution. So you did learn a lot about like you.
Sure.
I
Yes.
hope people's eyes just opened up. Um, but there was not enough about custody, which I do right now, and there was just more applicable things. And the reason why initially, like I thought Greg's podcast, I don't know how it inspired me. Like when I started understanding Bitcoin, I I grew in Colombia, which was a very, very poor country, and I was just born lucky. And I've always thought if there was more education, people could just do better things, get somewhere better, like improve their life. And like when I started understanding the Lightning Network, a little bit of the Lightning Network, I'm like, oh my God, these underbanked people or unbanked people could have such a simpler life. They won't have to travel in three different buses to go pay their bills. They won't have because they really have no money. So they want electricity. They have to spend an entire day just to go to the electric company to pay their bills. I'm like this is ridiculous. Like, and besides, they have their money in their hands and they're risking being robbed because Colombia was not secure. I'm like, okay, this has something that could benefit everybody. And I don't know why I was going there, but
No, but that
that
point is
was
so huge. And I think most people in North America don't get it. My aunt, she's now passed away, but had a huge impact on my life. She lived in a country called Croatia, and I would go there every summer. Um, as a kid, and my father would explain to me that in I guess it would be the late 1970s and early 1980s, he would send money to her in Croatia and to his parents, so my grandparents. She would then walk, and I know the bank exactly that she would go to. So if she would walk, I guess it would take like it's a whole day to walk to this bank and walk back. And she would walk to the bank, and he said he would be able to save up $500 at a time, which was an absolutely massive amount of money for my father to then send back home. And he would then pay a bank fee here in Canada to send the wire. And then what makes it way worse isn't that bank fee, is that when it was there, the bank there would then charge some fee that they would just pull out of the sky. Like there was no, like, it's not like in Canada where there's these documented fees. It was just like today's fee is $50 Canadian in the equivalent currency there, which was the dinar at the time. And then the guys at the bank would take their fee. So then she would lose money to just the workers there. So if my dad was sending 500, he figured out that she was getting in between 350 and 400.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
huge,
Wow.
right? Huge. Just think of all the money he had to work. He had to pay taxes on the money. He paid a fee to send the money. Then there's a bank fee that just changes on the whim of whoever's running the bank. Then there's the unofficial, we're taking this money from you. And my aunt would see the people who took the money having like a pretty extravagant lunch in the little town with her money. And she would walk.
And that still happens. It's not like it's
yeah,
not
and I know
like
it still,
right
still
now.
happens.
With remittances, like these countries, El Salvador, for example, has benefited so much from exactly what you're pointing out, because these companies, Western Union, like in order to take any money from the US to them, to a family member, it's exactly how you say. And besides the fact that I don't think it's that amount of percent difference anymore. Like there's a better,
yeah, I'm talking huge
it's a little
numbers.
bit cheaper.
Yeah, yes.
Exactly. It's a little bit cheaper, but there's a lot more people. But besides that, it takes forever, because until the money gets handed to them, it's like you have to follow the regulations and you have to go through a process, and it could be 3 days, 5 days. And people might need the money now. And why does a bank have the right to keep your money for that amount? And it's not really like, it's not even money, but yes, like why? It's my money.
It's like the modern banking system has they've put themselves in what I would call the toll booth position, whereas we all have to go through that toll booth and pay the toll, in or out, in or out. You're always paying this toll. And really the money in and of itself shouldn't have to go through a toll booth to be usable. We just happen to have a form of money that requires these toll booths, whereas like Bitcoin presents something else. So I guess your background with Colombia then, and seeing what people, how people deal with money there, I guess then Bitcoin had a real meaning for you that was maybe deeper than a lot of people would in Canada or the US. Can you talk, before we switch and continue going on this path, before we started recording, you alluded to real estate a little bit in Colombia. Was there a connection there? Can you talk about that?
Yeah. It's actually, okay, so yeah, you just reminded me. I'll give you a scenario in which, well, maybe this is not necessarily for like the most underbanked people, but this happened to my dad in Colombia. He used to own a business, and he worked really hard all his life. And with the revenues of the business, he bought an asset, like it was a farm that we used to go to. And it was like very, very, very like legal. Everything was fine about it. He really worked hard for it. But as time went on with his business, the situation in Colombia got horrible, and there was a lot of threats there was a union in that business, there was threats. So he decided to take a step back and to hire a manager that would have control of absolutely everything, like the finances, everything. He trusted that person. Long story short, that person sold our farm and escaped and left. And there was one day we went to farm and there was other people there. And we're like, what? And they showed us papers. We own the farm. He had all the rights so you're talking about real estate and the amount of change that could bring, like a multi-sig wallet that could have prevented that. I don't know, like a way to tokenize that asset. There's so many possibilities. Like I haven't walked through them, but just if my dad had a multi-sig wallet in order to make that transaction happen, 2 out of 3 keys, that wouldn't have happened. And the farm still would have been ours. But situations like that,
So
It's
can
just,
you
it
can you
makes,
explain and can you for people who don't know what a multi-sig wallet is, can you just walk them through that? Like why did that resonate with you? What is that?
okay, of course. So again, this is something that is very new to me. So multi-sig just means instead of you, because the first thing that people really should understand is to take their Bitcoin off exchanges. So even before I go into multi-sig, I beg, and I'm sure you've said it in your podcast a million times, please take Bitcoin off exchanges. I've learned the hard way, very hard way with Celsius. And
Oh,
I
geez.
don't like I don't want that to happen. Learned every lesson the hard way, but I've learned, and I want to teach. Like I want to teach people about what's happening, how they can be scammed, and please don't put yourself in that situation. So the first thing is please take your Bitcoin off exchanges. If you don't know how to get hard wallet, a cold wallet, there's millions of like we offer a service. I'm just walking people through getting their Bitcoin off exchanges. We just want. I can do that. Like that can be free. I don't care. I just want people to be safe first because that affects all of us. If people start getting scammed, then there's more false like rumors and false news and things like that. So people have to be educated. So so that's the first thing. But once you have your Bitcoin in your cold wallet, once you have the keys to your Bitcoin, it becomes for like if you start accumulating a little bit of wealth that actually is significant, it starts getting very stressful to have it yourself because you have no idea. Like I was very lucky that one of my sons understood Bitcoin. So at the beginning, I said, please know the keys are here. This is how you access them. And and every time I went on a trip, there's the keys. And I didn't even have them in separate locations. But then I realized the house can burn down. I don't really like so many things can happen that the Bitcoin is completely lost. And my sons won't benefit from that. So when I started understanding multi-sig wallets is like imagine what how I think of it is imagine you having a safe at home with the Bitcoin, but the safe has three keys and it can be have more than three keys. The safe has three keys and it requires two of the three keys to be opened. So if you have those keys distributed among different people in the family, for example, then I die, then my son and my husband have the other two keys. They can access the Bitcoin. And so that's to me, it's where custody is headed with multi-sig wallets because there's 2 out of 4 for a business. So I was talking about Colombia
Mhm.
for a business like exactly my dad's. He has like you have a lot of money under management, but you never know what people are going to do with that money if they have full control over the business's money. So now it becomes a way in which there's more control, less risk. Because if my dad would have had a key and this guy would have had a key, and I don't know, somebody else that he trusts would have had a key, then that would not have happened. He could not have unlocked that money by himself. Like everything has to be more of a collaborative effort. So it makes so much sense to me in in that
So
respect.
yeah, so that's why you were saying with your dad's property, if there was a multi-signature type option, nobody could have changed title to the property without your dad being involved if he held one of the keys or 2 out of 3 parties. So if you have good property like that farm was to your family, and today's good property in our examples is perhaps this digital property that we're calling Bitcoin, that if you accumulate whatever is a significant amount to you and your family, introducing a multi-signature option just is makes you feel safe and good
So
because
so much.
two out of 3 people have to sign any transaction to have the Bitcoin be sent somewhere else.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And
So
then tell me something. Go
no,
ahead.
no, and I'm just thinking. I think that's a pretty new concept for most people. There's going to be some people listening to this are very familiar with it, but for most people, I don't even think they may have heard this concept before. So, is this something that you're seeing with different wallets that you can use in Bitcoin? Is it getting a little easier? Are more people going down this path from what you're seeing? I feel like we're pretty
So
early with the multi-signature solutions, but I guess if you've been in the space, you've probably already seen some development and evolution here.
yes, so absolutely. So then it goes a little bit beyond multi-sig. So yes,
Mhm.
to answer your first question, it's becoming a little, for example, wallets such as Nunchuk allows you to very easily create a 2 out of 4 custody solution. You can do 2 out of 3, and it's actually very intuitive. It's a very intuitive
Which wallet? Sorry, which wallet
app.
was that? What was the name of that one?
Nunchuck.
Oh, the
It's
Numchuck. Yeah, yeah, Numchuck. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Nunchuck
yeah,
wallet.
yeah.
And then what I ended up working in right now that makes even more sense than multi custody, because with multi custody, you still have the risk of it's maybe you have all 3 keys and maybe something happens to the house, or maybe, I don't know, you still have that point of failure risk where you're holding all the like everything about those assets, depending on how it's being stored. So I started working. I'm very lucky to have started to have entered into this new world of collaborative custody. And what they do, because I just started. So what they do is it's a company based off Australia that used to manage assets for many, many years. Their reputation is phenomenal. So they, if a client goes to them, that company, the Bitcoin advisor, would hold a key. The client holds a key. And then, for example, the third key could be held by a wallet provider, a multi-sig wallet provider like Nunchuck. So in order to make any transaction, then 2 out of the 3, like somebody points a gun in your head, you can't do anything about it. Like you cannot literally send money from here to here. So we've worked, like right now, we're working with Unchained Capital, which is a company based in the US, and they provide that. So what happens is that instead of having single custody, what you do is you create a vault. You create as many vaults as you want with Unchained Capital because they're the provider. So Unchained can have a key, Bitcoin provider has a key, and the client has a key. And so then there's questions like, what about collusion? What about if Unchained and the Bitcoin advisor were to collude and like sign 2 transactions? It's not possible because the way this is set up, the first thing is only the client can initiate a transaction. Only the client. So none of them can start a transaction. And the second thing is jurisdictionally, one place is in Australia, one place is in the States, and the client can be anywhere in the world. So if for some reason there is some change of laws, like immediate change of law in any jurisdiction, this also like eliminates the risk of
Yeah, I never
any
thought about that.
government.
I never thought about that. You're spreading out the jurisdictional risk across countries or nation states.
Correct. And then, like to add to that, the service allows you to be able to plan for the future. So like with a trust, with an estate plan in reality. So they help you go through an estate plan where there's contingency, and it's an entire and it's everything is the client's decision. Like I choose who's going to custody, who's going to be the multi-custody provider, who is going to be the person that holds my trust. Is it my family? Is it a lawyer? But we go through the whole process of making sure that Bitcoin is save for future generations.
Yeah, I was going to ask
And
that about.
with
I was going to ask that because if it's 2 out of 3, but it's always the client who initiates it. If something was to happen to you, I guess there needs to be estate planning in place where some authority is
correct,
given to someone in your
correct,
family to initiate the transaction. Wow.
correct. So you would
Okay.
need like the death certificate of the person. You would need
Yeah. Yeah.
like
Like a
a lot
regular.
of documentation. Uh-huh.
Yes. Okay.
So there's so many redundancies in place,
Hmm.
um, that it really makes it literally impossible for your Bitcoin to be stolen. And the other thing is that with Bitcoin's technology improving, like I don't believe this exists yet, but there's going to be the possibility of you having a key that, for example, your grandchildren have. And that key only unlocks the Bitcoin in 2040 or in 2060. I
Wow.
don't know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've heard some
So,
people talking
so
about this.
that
Yeah, yeah, I got it. Yes.
so the possibilities of like you don't want your children to you die and like they spend the whole thing. So you want to take care of them. And there's so many new possibilities. And
You
it's
never thought about
coming.
that.
It's
If you can programmatically have, yeah, if you can have some programmatic, like a key that you can give to somebody and say, hey, listen, hold on to this. And you can't do anything with it, but programmatically, it automatically unlocks at a certain block,
correct.
then, which is a certain time in the future. It's a nice way to kind of build a trust without really needing any judicial systems of a certain nation. Yeah, that's
Exactly.
pretty wild. That is pretty
Exactly.
wild.
It's amazing. It's amazing. So I'm thrilled to be learning like
Yeah,
this
and it's funny because we're
these
all learning in the same time. Like you're saying, you're new to this, but anyone listening, when Dalia says she's new to this, it's because everybody's pretty much new to this. So it's not like there's like a history here. So are you help? So then I'm curious with BTC advisors, this is
Mhm.
you now are engaging with clients who you walk through this process. Like people are doing this.
Correct. So there's really two things I'm doing. Like
Okay.
I think I mentioned the fact that I work for Looking Glass Education,
That's right.
and
Sorry, I
that's
had
just
forgotten. Yes.
so that no. It's just so Looking Glass Education is just an educational platform
Mhm.
where there's free courses for everybody. There's a course on a fundamentals course which it's amazing. Like I had nothing to do with the writing up. So I cannot claim any of the content in Looking Glass, but it's amazing. There's deep dives. Actually, Greg Foss is part owner of that company. So anyway, with that company, the first thing we want is, like I said, self-custody.
Hmm.
So if somebody has no clue, because we've all had no clue how to take that step, they can call us, they can make an appointment with us with Looking Glass, and we can walk them through the process of how to go from exchange to self custody. They need help in choosing what wallet is best for them. We'll help them. They need help. We'll do simulations with them and then tell them like to erase everything, like everything that we did uh, for their security purposes
Sure.
and start it again. And then we give them a video that will walk them through the steps of video of the conversation that we had and
Oh,
how we
smart.
did it.
Yeah.
So then they can have that and listen to it a million times.
Hmm.
So that's a service we provide called Coddle
Oh, cool.
from Cold.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I don't know. And so that's one thing. And then with the Bitcoin advisor, I've become an advisor to the Bitcoin advisor. So if people are ready to go to collaborative custody, then like that's what we do. That's exactly what we do. Go step by step, hand in hand with a client that wants any of those services. Um,
And then do you
so
help them
so it's
through that service? Do you help them also buy Bitcoin if they wanted Bitcoin, or no, they go somewhere else to buy the Bitcoin?
they can okay, so it's their choice again. So
Okay.
it depends on where it has nothing to do with us. We don't want any money in the purchase of the Bitcoin. We don't want to profit from any of that.
Mhm.
So let's say that there's a completely new client that has never bought Bitcoin before. but wants Bitcoin. And a significant amount of Bitcoin starts to believe in Bitcoin
Sure.
as
You go down the rabbit hole.
money.
Yes, yes.
Exactly. So what we do is we take that, like we take what exchange do you want to buy you in? Do you want to do person to person? How do you want to convert your fiat to Bitcoin? Then we go through the process. Once you convert your fiat to Bitcoin in either an exchange or in a wallet of your own, then we transfer either some of it or all of it. Like if it's in an exchange, we definitely ask them to transfer everything to a cold wallet. So it's their Bitcoin.
Oh,
So
got it.
we
Okay.
go
So
through
you really
that,
are
and
acting
that
as advisors through this process to them. Got it.
correct.
Okay.
Correct. And that, like, those things are like, we don't charge for initial consultations. We don't charge if people like really want little things that were so hard for you and I to learn. And it's just that step is so difficult. Like you're
It's so scary.
petrified.
The first time you transfer, like I didn't have anyone to help me transfer from an exchange to my own hardware wallet. And then when you do that the first time, you just go through this like panic of, because there's a few minutes there where you're like, I don't know if this worked or what's
It's not
happening.
here.
Yeah. Yeah. There's somebody in our office who they bought a decent amount of Bitcoin and they set up their hardware wallet. And, I told them, I'm like, do not do anything more before I'm like right next to you. Like, just make sure, like, I just want you to check a few things. And they just transferred the entire amount they purchased, while I was getting a coffee. And my jaw dropped. And I guess they saw the look on my face and they're like, oh no, what did I do? And for whatever reason, it did take some time, I guess, for the exchange. We didn't know the exchanges sometimes will hold requests. So the exchange
Correct.
didn't put through the request, but the balance on the exchange went to zero. So he was seeing zero, and then nothing was coming up on his new hardware wallet to would indicate that the Bitcoin was under his control now in this new location. So there was this moment where we were just completely freaking out, and then we had to reach out to the exchange, and we got word that like, oh, they queued them up, and don't worry, it'll be released soon. And
But that's part of it. It's
yes.
centralized. The exchange has the ability to release it whenever they want.
And this was
So
early
that's
on. I came to know some of these people at this particular exchange that I don't want to name. And it was literally a person on their laptop that was going around like releasing the transactions and stuff. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, this
that's
is the Wild West right now. This is insane. But anyway, it all worked out. The bottom line in that story is that it all worked out.
good.
But
Good. And the
anyway,
person is holding their keys and knows the importance of
yeah,
their
so it
keys
is,
because
yeah, and there is a certain comfort once you start to hold your own keys like that, and you understand that you are in control. And then if you introduce multi-signature into it, there's kind of even another layer. But because the reason this is so important to you, and I don't want to, I don't want to like rehash some like history that maybe wasn't fun to go through. But can you describe to everyone like what happened with Celsius, or another example, like why do you tell people it's so important, like get off exchange? Because that's not normal for people. It's very normal for people to buy. In Canada, we have the equivalent of maybe your 401k in the US would be our RRSP. We have something called an RRSP, very similar kind of product. So people will buy Bitcoin. We've had an ETF up here for some time before it launched in the US. So people are very used to like buying things and keeping them in their financial institutions. Can you just share like why do you keep repeating that?
100%. So initially, no, I was already like somewhat knowledgeable with Bitcoin, but there was companies that would custody your Bitcoin and in return give you an interest just for it's like a regular bank. You just got an interest for keeping your Bitcoin there. So at that moment, there was Celsius, for example, was offering ridiculous interest rates for
I
custody.
forget, were they?
It
Okay,
started
I never really checked them out. So what were the interest rates?
for Bitcoin, it wasn't that much, but it was about 5% at that moment,
Okay.
where
Well, at the
interest rates
time,
were
interest
so
rates
much
were like zero
lower.
point 0.5, so it was huge. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, got it.
But
Okay.
other cryptos, it was 20%, 15%. Like the UST with Luna, they were offering
I
20%.
remember that one because one night I sat down and I'm like, okay, am I just silly? Like, do I just not understand? Like, I don't understand how they can be offering this interest rate. And I never could figure it out. And I'm the type of person, unless it makes sense to me, I don't proceed. So I can never go down that path. But I remember being mystified by that one because I think I saw 19% or something crazy. I
Yeah.
was like, wow.
And I have to tell you that I put money in UST, but I said, this is way too good to be true. So I got an insurance, which was a possibility at that moment, depegging insurance.
Huh.
And I'm one of the very few people that got my money back
Oh,
because I had
wow.
an insurance. And but like who, like if you know a tiny bit about, like if you're a little bit I don't know, critical. Like,
Yeah.
how can somebody be? It's a Ponzi scheme. These are Ponzi schemes, and how are people like doing this? So, but with Celsius, like I used to go to the AMAs of Alex Mashinsky, who was the head, and he would be so convincing. Your Bitcoin is safe. We have it. Like everybody's Bitcoin is here, etc. Nothing is going to happen with the exchange. With the big, like with your properties, it's much safer with us than with you, etc. And then all assets got frozen, including mine. And it was because he took our Bitcoin and went and did risky trades. And when the market was going up, great. But then when the market crashed, they had nothing to back
At time,
the
yeah,
client's
yeah.
assets.
Throughout history, humans, it's like, this has been done in the real estate world. This is a story that's been repeated over and over and over again. So it's not something really new. It was just new to this space. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Exactly. So it's been saga. Like it's been I still don't have my assets. So they went on into bankruptcy and then they
Got it.
formed a new mining company. So they're giving us shares of the new company, but they're giving us like, I don't know, 50 cents on the dollar. And they're valuing the Bitcoin on as the value it was on the day that they went bankrupt. So it was like $19,000. So if I had, let's say, very lucky one Bitcoin, then they would only give me a certain percentage of those $19,000. So
Mm.
it's not even a percentage of what Bitcoin is worth today. It's percentage of what Bitcoin was worth then. So you lose in every direction. But it's at least one of the few cases that got resolved, and we're getting at least a little bit of money back
Yeah.
because there's
Sure.
other like FTX. I don't know if anybody's seeing their money or there's so many other platforms. As soon as that happened, I'm like, no more.
Mhm.
I learned my lesson.
It's interesting because you
So
had the family story with the farm and that property through your father and your family, then the Celsius story. So it's just ingrained in you now to own things directly. If you have a good property, own the property under your own control and even introduce multi-signature like you've been discussing to really safeguard it. Okay, so
correct.
then Dalia,
Correct.
I'm curious from what you're seeing, you kind of referred to the Lightning Network really briefly. So like, do you really think in Colombia at some point you can see people over the next 10, 20 years, like using like the Lightning Network or digital money in a country like Colombia to help them in their economy? Like you see that coming to fruition and
100.
yeah. Because right now they're using American dollars in Colombia? No.
No, they
What?
have pesos, Colombian
Oh,
pesos,
there are
which
Colombian
is
pesos.
another
Okay.
which is another benefit that they could have, not just using the Lightning Network, but by storing stable coins, for example,
Mhm.
they could de-risk the inflation. There was a 10% inflation last year, about. I'm not 100% sure. And the GDP, the growth in the country was like 1% or
Yeah,
something like
got
that.
it. Okay.
And and there's a socialist president who is very likely going to start taking assets away from people. So there's so much risk, but I'm going back to people in their uses, in like the people where I started
Mhm.
thinking about. Absolutely. Everybody has a cell phone. Even the poorest human
Mm,
being has a cell phone. So and they're starting to use Bitcoin in Colombia. It's very logical that an electric bill company is going to allow people to pay through the Lightning Network
mhm.
instead of, because all really the Bitcoin is just the network itself. It's just the way of exchanging the coins, but they can have Colombian pesos, use the Lightning Network as a tool, and the company would get Colombian pesos. So it's like a no-brainer. Um, and
Mhm.
this has been implemented in other countries in Africa. It's been implemented in countries and continents. But Argentina, people are starting to then store either Bitcoin or even USD stable coins to hedge their inflation. So it could give people so much more possibility.
Yeah, I can see it.
And
I don't know if you know Maurizio, who runs Ledin out of Toronto. He's from Venezuela. He runs a company called Ledin out of Toronto, and they do a lot of stuff with people in Colombia, he said, using stable coins. He said their bigger user base is South Americans because they're trying to just protect their purchasing power. And I think what a lot of people don't understand still about Bitcoin is there's two aspects to it. There's the asset component that we've been talking about, but you've also been alluding to the network itself. And so Bitcoin is a network or a protocol and an asset. And it's this protocol that's really interesting to me because in your example, you said, yeah, you can use your Colombian pesos and use the Lightning Network which is part of using the Bitcoin network to then pay a utility company. And that's kind of the really interesting thing. It's like, what most people don't understand is that there's a second financial network being built out that's in direct
right.
competition to the existing toll booth network that we were talking about, this whole banking system. And once this protocol evolves, it seems to me that anytime I've seen an open network, I remember working in the database industry at Oracle, and then there was like an open source database called MySQL. And it was scaring the shit out of Oracle because it was like, oh my gosh, there's this like open source database that people are using and it's free and it's kind of sort of just as good. And it was putting panic. And the same thing happened with Linux when people were using Unix and they were buying Unix from either IBM or Sun Solaris. And then there was this Linux version, which was like an open source version. So you had this database that was open source that was freaking out the old school people. Then it was Linux. And then if you look at the BlackBerry was a closed network. And then the iPhone came out that just used TCP/IP, which was the open network. So there's all these examples throughout very recent history to me that and that's kind of why I get so excited about Bitcoin. I'm like, okay, like the asset is really interesting, but it's the network side of it that is going to blow people's socks off, and they don't quite realize it yet.
Correct. And it's not just because of the network. Think of, like, for example, the merchants. I'm talking about the clients are going to benefit tremendously. But
Yeah,
merchants are going to benefit as well they won't have to pay a 3%
yeah.
on every transaction to the banks, to the intermediaries. So in general, costs could be driven down with uh, an implementation of the Lightning Network. Like if a government is smart and really, really wants their population to have a better life, then it's a no-brainer. Like there's no need for banks. There's no need for centralization. Uh,
How dare you? How
so
dare you say that? I'm joking. I'm joking. Yeah, and you're right. If a business is operating at a 10% margin and you can save 3% on fees, that's like a 30% increase to your bottom line. So like when people hear that these fees are small fees and who really cares? Well, to a business that like I know some people who operate some construction companies in the last year and a half has been really tight. They're either losing money or they're operating at like 2%. And I guess a construction company isn't doing a lot of Visa transactions. A restaurant's a better example. But if you're operating at thin margins, a 3% increase because of the fees that you're saving on by not paying them is huge to your bottom line. So yeah, you're right. To the merchants, it's beneficial to the consumer and it's beneficial to the merchants. Why is Colombia? I'm just curious. I'm going to keep you just for a few more minutes, Dalia. Why is Colombia um, this socialist, how did somebody with the socialist views get into power in Colombia? Is it the classic case of they just promised people a lot of stuff so everybody votes for them?
Ah, you got it. You just
Yeah.
defined it.
Yeah.
It's exactly that. He, it's actually a very sad story because um, he actually used to be in one of the leader of one of the guerrilla groups in Colombia. I don't know if guerrilla, you say guerrilla in Spanish, like the
Yeah, yeah,
um,
no. I think we've all watched enough TV, Netflix shows about Colombia that we all know what they are.
so he really was like a very violent human being in
Wow.
how he like kidnapped, and he, besides many other things I don't want to speak to, but
Sure.
eventually the government made a treaty with that guerrilla group and they were pardoned. And then he became the presidential candidate and managed to convince like the
Oh, wow.
population that he was going to give them everything. Like he's promising healthcare, food, everything. And it's been a disaster because there's much more centralization and there's much more printing of money. And there's like, it's like he's getting rid, he really is getting rid of the local, like international investment is no longer coming to Colombia. um, so there's less jobs. Like everything has gone wrong, and it's because he just promised everybody thought it was perfect. It was they were
It's
gonna
almost like
live
think
an amazing life.
it's weird where we are because I could almost like I'm worried about Canada's path because I'm like, oh my gosh, in the next election, which is 2025, ours will likely be in a year. If the existing government here starts promising everybody UBI, which I think could be on the table, I'm like, oh my gosh, everybody's going to vote for it. And
Mhm.
it's almost like things have to get so bad and so close to like almost pure out communism that it takes almost that for people to like kind of wake up. And it's tough because if you're going to make a change now, there's some suffering involved. So it's really hard politically to get up there and say, listen, everything's going to be great, but it's going to be great in about 3 to 5 years, maybe 7, So right now in the next 3 years, everything's going to be horrible. There's going to be less money. We have to save money and there's going to be less money for all these things. So vote for me. You know, it's kind of like,
Nobody, yeah, you're right. You're
like
right.
it's we're just on this path where you can see it and you're like, oh no, like, it's hard to turn it around. So that's unfortunate that Colombia is going down that route. I wish the best
And,
for them.
and the only semi-positive thing is that people have started realizing that he was just fluff. So there's so many protests, and I
Oh,
hope
really?
the
Okay.
next
Got it.
election, like people, everybody that voted for him is now going against him. It just,
Yeah. Yeah.
those promises just don't happen. Like
No.
that's too good to be true. Like the UST and the Celsius, and there's things that are way too good to be true. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, like,
Maybe the only
uh,
way to get elected with good intentions is to basically, for everyone's own good, just tell them they're going to get everything. Then when you get in power, you have to trick them and say, oh my gosh, I'm actually going to cut everything and we're going to save money. And I'm in power now. So like we need somebody to do the reverse trick, instead of like promising everything and then getting in power and not being able to fulfill, promising everything, getting into power, not being able to fulfill, but correcting the course. Maybe that's the only way that this is going to happen, and they have to have a thick skin because everyone's going to hate them as they do that. But
you're right.
Dalia,
You're
yeah,
right.
yeah, it's tough. But so okay, so if with what you're doing now, if someone wanted to reach out to you, like do people email you? Do they go to a website? How would someone reach out to you, start
So,
engaging with you?
sure. So there's an email, a very easy email, Dalia at the bitcoinadvisor.com. That works. Uh, Probably the easiest way. Or I strongly, really, I'm really not selling this, but if they want to start learning, like just go to Looking Glass. They don't have to look for me. They don't have to do anything. Just go to Looking Glass, take their courses. They're phenomenal. Or go to the Bitcoin Advisor because there's so many amazing articles about the benefits of collaborative custody. So it really isn't about me. Like
Yeah, it is. But we need people like you in this space who it's not about you, but are willing to help. So you're being so humble, but it's really cool. So if anyone listening to this wants to reach out to Dalia, it's Dalia, Dalia, correct? Dalia at thebitcoinadvisor.com. So Dalia at the Bitcoin Advisor, or Looking Glass Education. If you just Google up Looking Glass Education, you'll find that resource as well. And Dalia, it's really cool for me. Like, this is a really meaningful thing to me that Bitcoin exists, just partly because of what my family and, and hearing your story. We all have these family stories. And to me, Bitcoin can solve a lot of problems. And to know that there's a great people like you out there contributing to this, it's very meaningful for me. So thanks for taking the time to share this on this podcast. You don't know us too well. We'll have to blame Greg for setting this up, but I'm very thankful. So it's great crossing paths. Please know that you have friends up here in Toronto. I don't know why you would become from Miami, and then I don't know why you'd be coming up to Toronto, but if you ever do, you have friends up here. And
that's so sweet.
Please keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you so much for even giving me the opportunity. Like I'm no one, and you contacted me and tried a couple of times because we couldn't make it happen. So thank you. Thank you for insisting and for giving me that opportunity. And I'd love to learn more about you and your whole journey. We're
a funny business. And we're a funny business up here. That's a long story, Dalia. Well, one day, maybe we'll share a meal or a drink somewhere, and I'll share the story with you. But thank you for this. Right. Thank you. Hey, thanks for tuning in. You can find every new episode of the Your Life, Your Term show on all the major streaming platforms. So Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. And if you'd like to get free copies of some of the books that we've put together, like these right here, or some of the reports that we've put together, like these right here, you can find all of those at www.rockstarinnercircle.com. That's www.rockstarinnercircle.com. That's it for now. Until next time, your life, your terms.